From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Cuban diplomats have rejected the U.S. blockade during an intense meeting in the United Nations. Shouting Cuba yes, blockade no, diplomats say the United States is using the UN to launch a campaign against the island. The meeting was held by the UN Economic and Social Council under the demands of the United States. Cuban diplomats consider this to be a violation of the organization's rules and charter. They shouted and banged on their desks in protest.
Cuba is proud of its human rights record, which denies any manipulation against it. On the contrary, the United States lacks the moral to give lessons, as much less in this manner.
Our correspondent in New York, Karina Cartagena, tells us more about the meeting.
There has been a tense meeting in the United Nations as the United States tried to launch a campaign against Cuba. Cuba condemned the U.S.'s attempt to use the UN to launch that campaign. Cuba sees this as a violation of United Nations Charter, a violation of the use of conference rooms and an act against a member state. At the beginning of the meeting, the U.S. deputies tried to prevent Cuban diplomats from presenting, and UN security personnel tried to remove representatives from the room. The General Secretary of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, was present as a United States guest. But those present rejected his presence when he criticized the Cuban government. This meeting has taken place just a few days before the General Assembly is expected to vote on a request for the U.S. to put a stop on the economic sanctions against Cuba.
The migrant caravan heading towards the United States continues to advance to the Guatemala-Mexico border. About 1,000 migrants set off on Saturday, but the group has now grown to over 3,000. Members of the caravan have decried their living conditions in Honduras and spoke out against statements by the region's government.
In Honduras, we have a corrupt government. Honduras should be sanctioned for condemning these migrants to misery, for keeping them in a country full of violence. The government of Honduras is corrupt. They have murdered people in the streets. It is a criminal government, supported by Donald Trump. They have caused this migration. The sanctions are already there. People are already suffering them.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to cut funding for Honduras if he doesn't stop the caravan. Trump warned via Twitter that migrants should not try to enter the country without legal documents. He said the Honduran president should take immediate action to stop them. Mexico has also said it won't allow the migrants to enter unless they comply with immigration requirements. Our correspondent in Guatemala City, Mario Rosales, has more details.
The caravan of Honduran migrants is currently headed to the east of Guatemala. From there, they plan to arrive to the Mexican border with the final goal of entering the U.S. The caravan continues to move forward despite the threats of President Donald Trump towards the Honduran government. Trump has said that if the caravan is not stopped, all economic aid to Honduras will be cut immediately. Human rights organizations are demanding the government of Guatemala guarantee the rights of migrant children, saying that the life of children should be their main concern. That's all we have for you now.
Venezuela has announced that the US dollar will no longer be used as a reference for transactions in the domestic market. Minister of Industries and National Production, Tarek El Aissami, said the transactions will now be referenced to euro, yuan, or other convertible currency. This includes auctions under the foreign exchange system known as TICOM. The minister also announced that the country is set to open bank accounts in Asia and Europe to carry out hard currency transactions.
We're We're going to begin, and we've already advanced with Asian and European countries. The opening of bank accounts that serve as banking correspondents and intermediaries for the operations that are beginning at this moment.
This announcement comes soon after the National Development Plan was launched in 6 different parts of the country.
The workers' movement, state governors and the president took part in a meeting to learn about the National Development Plan. It is based on 15 priority areas for production. As part of the new economic model launched almost 2 months ago, the goal is economic independence.
They are using techniques of economic war to twist the arm of the people, and many of them are also involved in political conspiracies. I count on you to take the action that is necessary.
In a country that has been under economic siege but wants to overcome this, more and more businessmen are joining this new economic era. Among the results, Venezuela's cryptocurrency, the petro.
We want to support this new initiative of the governments to boost supplies and production and to get the goods on the shelves. This is an opportunity to reach the agreements that are needed for this.
The workers say they have to work for the country to overcome this financial blockade imposed from abroad.
We have to be the leading pillar of Venezuela, in spite of everything other countries have done to us. The working class is the priority for this country and for its oil production.
New elements are being added to the Recovery and Growth Plan, which seeks to bring together different sectors of the population to achieve the well-being of all Venezuelans.
Venezuelans will have to present their passports again to enter Peru. Migration authorities say this will continue until the judiciary decides on an appeal against a resolution that ordered the restriction to be annulled. The public prosecutor in El Salvador has ordered the arrest of former President Mauricio Funes. The prosecutor has released 25 arrest warrants against public workers and individuals for crimes related to money laundering and bribery. Funes was investigated for diverging more than $300 million during his term in office. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. Brazilian presidential candidate Fernando Haddad spoke to reporters about the possible political alliances ahead of the runoff on October 28. He also touched on some of his plans if he wins the election.
I've reached out to people I respect, independently of their political party. I've not invited anyone yet. I'm gauging options. I am speaking to highly respected people. I want to build the broadest government possible. Brazil needs that, but I've not given out any invites. But I'll keep reaching out to people. In contrast with Bolsonaro, we've decided to keep no one from outgoing President Michel Temer's economic team in our government. On January 1st, Temer's team leaves, and a new team will come in.
And Haddad, a former teacher, returned to his roots when he attended an event held by Brazil's Teachers Union. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo tells us more on this report.
On Teachers' Day, Haddad was welcomed by a group of teachers working as a collective of Sao Paulo. Meanwhile, his political rival, Jair Bolsonaro, was in Rio de Janeiro meeting members of BOPE, a military squad known for human rights violations.
Bolsonaro has only 2 educational projects, to militarize schools and to outsource them. Haddad, instead, has a national educational program that benefits not only teachers, but students.
When Haddad was the Minister of Education, he enforced programs as a matter of priority, such as University for All, scholarships, and the Open University of Brazil. He expressed his regret over the absence of Bolsonaro in electoral debates, and that as 20 years as a deputy, he only implemented 2 projects.
I apologize for not being able to debate with my opponent. The debate was scheduled. I know why he avoided it. It's because his campaign is completely based on lies sent via WhatsApp. The campaign starts now. Our challenge is to take 9% off of him. With that amount, we will win the election. Analysts say it's hard, and it is in fact a difficult task, but it would be more difficult to withstand a government like the one he proposes.
Haddad has promised to revoke Temer's policies such as labor and educational adjustment reforms and freezing social investment for 20 years, decisions that were supported by Bolsonaro.
After 5 weeks on a strike, unions and social movements in Costa Rica are planning a mass demonstration against the government's tax reform plan. It is said to coincide with a crucial court ruling on the validity of the reform. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, reports.
Today could be a landmark day for the government's proposed tax reform. The country's judiciary is set to make a decision on whether the reforms process up to this point is open to legal objection. If the court decides it is, that would basically block the bill, because it would mean the bill needs 38 votes to pass, which it does not currently have. So after being passed by the Legislative Assembly in their first debate, the whole process could be struck down and a brand new reform bill would need to be drafted. Trade unions and opposition parties remain expectant over today's decision, which should come in the next few hours.
Hundreds of supporters of Peru's jailed opposition leader Keiko Fujimori have marched in Lima to demand her release. She has been in jail since last Wednesday, accused of money laundering. Marchers also expressed their support for her convicted father, former President Alberto Fujimori, whose pardon was overturned earlier this month. He was serving 25 years in jail for human rights abuses during the 1990s.
I'm joining the march like thousands of Peruvians who are coming here today, not just from Lima, but from different parts of the country, to show their support demanding the freedom of Keiko Sofia Fujimori.
They took away Alberto Fujimori's pardon because of ill will, for revenge. And that's why we have come here, with heart, with love in our hands to support the Fujimoris.
The Peruvian Congress has closed the case to dismiss public prosecutor Pedro Chavarri. With 17 votes for and 9 against, Congress has rejected his dismissal. Earlier, social organizations demanded his removal in a protest. Demonstrators say now the investigations into Keiko Fujimori and others in power could be at risk. Injustice against indigenous people in Mexico is of great concern to the UN rapporteurs, who say these conditions must end.
According to the Ombudsman's office, at least 72% of indigenous people in Mexico live below the poverty line.
The percentage of those living in extreme poverty is huge among indigenous people. The National Income and Expense Survey from 2016 points out that nearly 500,000 teenagers are gradually behind in their learning, and an even higher number don't even go to school.
Mexico's representative to the UN talked to us about their concern over the constant aggression and criminalization that indigenous people face while trying to defend their land.
The original people of these lands not only suffer discrimination and lack of access to economic, social and cultural rights, but are also affected by the giveaway of their lands to mega projects without their consent.
During the presentation of her report, the Special UN Reporter for Indigenous People highlighted the grave situation they face due to collusion between organized crime and some authorities.
I received complaints of abuse against indigenous people during military operations by the government against organized crime. There is great concern over deaths caused by excessive force from authorities and also of sexual assault against indigenous women.
Indigenous women also took part in the report's presentation. They condemned the attempts of the government in eradicating the traditions of their communities.
It's really sad that those in power abuse and divide us. We are all Mexican. All of us practice different customs and traditions.
It is estimated that 8.3 million indigenous people live in poverty and another 3.2 million lack access to basic goods.
We spoke exclusively to the chief negotiator of Colombia's National Liberation Army, Pablo Beltrán, who joined us from Havana, about the possibility of resuming peace talks with the government of Iván Duque.
We have to say that unfortunately Duque has allowed the military forces to somehow be involved in the negotiation table. And he said to them, in my first 100 days of government, you should carry out a military offensive against the National Liberation Army's leadership. And that once that showed results, they could think of resuming talks. We know the government is carrying a military offensive against the National Liberation Army, and depending on those results, thinking of returning to the dialogue table.
A group of young Guatemalans are collecting solid waste to draw attention to the contamination of the Atitlan Lake.
These young people from a musical band called Sabor Latino started the day with a mission to clean the dock of the San Pablo area in Sololá.
We have focused more in the artistic area, but we see the situation in which the lake is, the diseases, the bacteria, and all the garbage that accumulates in the shore of the lake. We take the initiative to be fully committed to this environmental activity.
The famous and tranquil Atitlan Lake is being polluted, and the youth is witness to its ruin.
I always take this route to go to school. Then every time I pass here, I'm very sad to see that all of this part is full of garbage.
These youngsters say that during their cleaning, they have detected at least 3 types of contamination: black waters, waste from agrochemicals dragged by the rain, and mainly solid waste.
We have found that the waste produced by the large companies, the industries, specifically cans, plastic, and disposable bags, they're the major contaminants of our lake.
The question these young people always ask is if they will be able to fully clean the Atitlan Lake, which has a surface of more than 130 square kilometers.
We are only cleaning the shores of the lake in a symbolic way, so that way we transmit that message.
We are also trying to talk with people from other municipalities so that we can join and do something for the lake, so that we do not lose it in order to someday be really sorry about it.
There are 12 areas in the Sololá province, which are situated on the shores of the Atitlan Lake. The next plan of action for this group of young people will be to demand the municipal council approves a regulation which will stop the use of plastic bags.
Santiago Botón, Telesur, San Pablo, La Laguna, Sololá, Guatemala.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The South African opposition has dismissed reports claiming the party benefit from the founding of a collapsed bank. A report says the Economic Freedom Fighters Party received more than $1 million out of more than 150 million that were looted at a mutual bank. But leader Julius Malema has accused opponents of using the report to smear the party ahead of the 2019 elections.
Don't call them ANC municipalities. Why? We cannot taint Ramaphosa. We must discredit the EFF, and Peter Bruce makes it very clear, vote for the ANC white people in order to stop the EFF. This is an agenda to stop the EFF. That's why I'm not even moved or shaken. All the public representatives, you go after one young man who holds no office at all. You want to create an impression that our deputy president is in the Mutaung report. You make mistakes deliberately. You know why? Because you know you will say sorry. After tarnishing images of people, the only thing you can do is sorry. And
one person has been killed in Guinea on the second day of protests over the disputed elections. A relative say 22-year-old Brahima Balde was shot in the chest by security forces in the capital Conakry. The opposition said the elections in February this year were fraudulent. They've announced more protests on Thursday with the intention of bringing to the capital to a standstill. The family of kidnapped billionaire Mohammed the Jew in Tanzania have offered a reward of nearly $500,000. The Jew was abducted by gunmen as he entered a hotel gym. He's chief executive of Med Group, which operates in dozens of African countries with interests in multiple sectors. He reported as being one of Africa's youngest billionaires. Saudi Arabia's Consul General to Turkey has left the country just hours after a search of his residence was announced. This over the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A Turkish investigation team has already searched the Saudi consulate looking for clues of Khashoggi's whereabouts. The team found some toxic materials that had been painted over and an audio recording that may indicate that the journalist was killed. And United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with King Salman and his son, the Crown Prince. They reportedly discussed Khashoggi's disappearance and agreed on a thorough investigation. Khashoggi, who was an outspoken critic of the kingdom, went missing after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul 2 weeks ago. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has said some items in the Saudi consulate have been painted over. He spoke after the consulate had been searched for 9 hours. Some toxic materials were also found at the premises.
Right now, as you are aware, as a result of our intense contacts, this search process in the consulate has started. Yesterday there was an intense procedure underway until morning, and it will continue. My hope is that we can reach conclusions that will give us a reasonable opinion as soon as possible. Because the investigation is looking into many things, such as toxic materials and those materials being removed by painting them over, this will depend on the conclusion that will come out from there.
UN Special Rapporteur on Torture Niels Melzner said more evidence is needed before making any assumptions in the case of the missing Saudi journalist. The official also said international organizations should get involved if there's no answer based on credible and objective investigations.
If no solution can be found in conducting a credible and objective investigation on that level, then perhaps at some point international mechanisms should get involved. I think we're a little bit early in the process to come to a definite conclusion there, because obviously this is a very delicate issue, and I think we should give the involved states time under public scrutiny to come to a conclusion that they want to address this problem.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has met with her cabinet as Brexit negotiations enter a critical phase. May has 48 hours to convince her cabinet to back her Brexit plan before she meets European Union leaders to finalize the terms of the UK's departure. The EU Brexit talks have reached a stalemate over the issue of the Irish border. The UK is due to leave the EU in March.
There are still many open topics, including Ireland. So I believe more time is needed to find this comprehensive agreement. And to achieve this decisive progress, we need to finalize this negotiation on the orderly withdrawal of the UK. This is the state of play, and we will work on this calmly, seriously, in order to reach the comprehensive agreement in the coming weeks.
2 pilots have been killed in an Ukrainian Air Force jet crash. The aircraft went down during a training exercise. One of the pilots killed was a U.S. citizen, while the other was an Ukrainian. The circumstances of the crash are under investigation. We come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.